When it comes to towing, a lot of people think of a pickup truck as their first and perhaps only real solution. But what if you don't really need a truck bed and instead you're okay with a big lockable box that can carry a lot of people and things? Well, that is where the SUV comes in. And you've got a lot of variety, a lot of choices when it comes to SUVs, and they can tow a lot of different amounts of weight. But if you're looking to tow heavier, to say a race car, a boat, maybe a horse, you're going to be looking at a large 3-row body-on-frame SUV, more or less, as your only option. And you see a lot of options from mainstream manufacturers like Chevrolet and Ford and Nissan, but there are also, of course, offerings in the luxury space. And today we're going to look at one from Infiniti. This is Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake, and this is the 2023 Infiniti QX80. We'll talk all about what the 2023 Infiniti QX80 is, what matters when it comes to towing with one of these, and then we will get it out on the road with a 20-foot enclosed trailer towing my race car and talk all about how it actually performs towing a trailer in the real world. All right, so what is the 2023 Infiniti QX80? Well, it is of course on a platform shared with a Nissan, as is every other Infiniti on sale. Platform sharing is not a bad thing. It works in very many cases, and it does work here as well. This is the platform mate of the Nissan Armada. That was not always the case. They really only became platform mates officially around 2017, but the QX80, since its second generation began in 2011, more on that in a second, has always been related to the Nissan Patrol, which is sold overseas. And if you think of the Toyota Land Cruiser and Lexus LX sort of relationship, this is the exact same thing. So overseas, Toyota has a very basic Land Cruiser that can be had with cloth seats and a diesel and, minimal options. Overseas, Nissan has a Nissan Patrol that is kind of the same sort of thing. It's a very off-road focused, capability first sort of vehicle, very bare bones otherwise. Nissan brought it here and at first just called it the Infiniti QX. At the time it was the QX56, now it's the QX80, and then eventually they got the Armada on the platform as well. So there's your little platform sharing tidbit of the day. Now I mentioned 2011. This QX80 has been on sale in this generation, in this body style, since 2011. It's had several glow-ups, it's had 2 facelifts, and then it got a minor little refresh in 2022. So this is the most recent variant of it, and you'll notice that styling is a little different if you go back and look at some of the earlier pre-facelift models of the QX80. Powertrain-wise, they got a little more power and torque out of this engine a few years ago. This is the corporate Nissan and Infiniti 5.6-liter naturally aspirated V8. It makes 413 horsepower and 400 pound-feet of torque. It goes exclusively through a 7-speed torque converter automatic transmission. And then you've got your choice of rear-wheel drive if you want your utility vehicle to be less utilitarian, or you can have all-wheel drive. Now, this one is a fully loaded QX80 Sensory with all-wheel drive, and I say all-wheel drive even though Infiniti markets it as 4-wheel drive because it's always engaged. You cannot lock it into rear-wheel drive, but it does have a 2-speed transfer case, so you've got standard high range and then you've got the optional low range. Now, there's 2 other things going on with the suspension in particular that we should talk about that are interesting. They are helpful for the sake of towing, and they're also helpful for daily driving and, overall livability. So, first things first, you've got hydraulic body motion control. I think I said that right. Hydraulic body motion control. It is a system that is used on the Armada as well, and it is very similar to a system that Toyota uses in some of their large SUVs as well. I most recently sampled it at this point several years ago in the 4Runner called XREAS. It is a cross-link suspension system. So basically, there are hydraulic lines running between the shock absorbers, and when you take a turn, let's say if you're driving facing the way I'm facing, you turn right, like the steering wheel is turned, the body wants to roll over on the left side of the vehicle. What will happen is fluid will flow to the shocks on the outer side of the vehicle, so on the left side, and it will counteract that body roll force and kind of keep the body pushed up so you're not dealing with as much body roll. That helps for passenger comfort, it helps for drivability, it helps for handling. It is a nice system to have, and it can benefit your towing as well. The other thing that you will find is located at the rear axle only, and it is automatic rear load leveling. So there are rear airbags here. They work completely on their own based on some sensors. And if you've got cargo in the back, if you've got a lot of people back here, or if you've got the tongue weight of a trailer, it will automatically kick a compressor on. It will pump up the back to maintain a level ride height. That is great for the sake of looks, first of all, but it's also helpful for the sake of keeping your headlights level at night. So you've got headlights where you want them. They're pointed in front of you, not blinding traffic, not looking up at the moon. And we do have to talk about weight distribution because automatic load leveling is not a substitute for a proper weight distribution hitch, and Infiniti even says such when they talk about loading up the QX80 with a trailer. So we're going to talk towing, and we're going to start by talking about a piece of plastic. This is a very important piece of plastic, and I talk about this with every SUV that uses one of these because these are all bumper cover finishers in a sense. This goes right here to cover the trailer hitch because it's unsightly and unseemly if you have a nice expensive SUV to tell the world that you might actually use it for utility type purposes. So when you want to tow with your QX80, you have to remove this panel. And thankfully, Infiniti has made it really easy to do that. And that is a big deal because not every manufacturer does that. I'm looking at you, Lexus. Several manufacturers require you to take a flathead screwdriver and pop some little push pins loose, which means you have to A, find a screwdriver, B, pop those pins loose, C, try to not break them, and then D, figure out where to put it all while you're towing a trailer. Infiniti has made this nice and easy. These little tabs go into the top part of the bumper cover here, and then all you have to do is use these two little finger screws to loosen the bottom clips that will let you remove the whole panel from the bumper cover. So no tools required for this. Really, really nice. And then even better, there's a little underfloor storage spot where the back of the cargo floor can be pulled up. This will fit under there and let the floor go flat, and you will not damage it, you will not lose it, and it will be tucked away nicely. So love how they did this. It's a very small detail in the grand scheme of building a car, but someone put some thought into this. So thank you, Infiniti, for that. Now, as far as actually towing with this QX80, standard tow hitch receiver right here, 2-inch receiver. Every QX80, regardless of drive wheels or trim level that you pick, is rated for 8,500 pounds with 10% tongue weight, so 850 pounds back here. Pretty standard. You do have your regular trailer safety chain eyes right there. They are nice and large. They can hold a large safety chain hook, which is important if you've got a bigger trailer. And then you've got a wiring harness connector right here. You only get a 7-pin, so if you need a 4-pin, it's gonna have to require an adapter that you hook on, but no big deal. Now, with all that, we should talk payload, and I'm not going to talk about it back here because it doesn't matter what Infiniti says the payload is on all QX80s. You really need to look at the one on the door jamb of the vehicle that you are going to be purchasing, because based on the options you pick, the trim level, the drive wheels, everything else, it can vary quite a bit. So let's go back to the driver's door jamb and see what the payload is on this guy in particular. So with any vehicle you're looking at purchasing for the sake of towing, you need to check payload. Payload refers to the total amount of occupants and cargo that you can have inside your vehicle according to the manufacturer. Now, in a lot of cases, this doesn't much matter because what does it hurt to overload your payload by a couple 100 pounds to take, everyone out for a night on the town to go to dinner or whatever. I'm not saying I would want to do it all the time, but I get it. You might overload things a couple times. But if you're towing, you really want to be careful because it affects the handling and the balance of your car, and you really want to be safe and not be super overloaded or overloaded at all, in fact, because if you were to have any sort of incident on the road, suddenly you become an insurance liability. So let's take a look at the payload on this QX80. Payload is often a concern of mine with trucks and SUVs because people are willing to load them up and not really think about it. So, you've got space for 5 to 7 people in here based on what you've got behind the seats if you're, say, going to a racetrack or towing the boat for a family vacation. And then you put the trailer on the back and you just kind of think, it's all fine, and you probably aren't fine. So, door jamb sticker right here. This is going to be on every new car. And in this case, Infiniti says the combined weight of occupants and cargo should never exceed 1,300 pounds. Now that is actually fairly decent as far as this segment of vehicle goes. It's not especially great on the grand scheme of things. If you remember the Ford Excursion, it's why the Excursion sold so well, but the Excursion was based on a Ford F-250 pickup truck, not an F-150, much like this is kind of like a 1500 series pickup truck, sorta. So payloads are going to be pretty typical. This is pretty typical, not the highest, not the lowest. Now you have to keep in mind if you've got a trailer that is close to the top of your tow rating. In my case, I'm pulling about 7,000 pounds with my enclosed trailer. Let's do easy math and say that's a 700 pound tongue weight and be on the safe side. 1,300 minus 700 means I have room for 600 pounds of people and stuff in this QX80. So that's actually decent. It means I could have me and a friend and all of our stuff and still have some payload left. I could probably have me and 2 friends and our stuff and be comfortable. but you don't want to load this up with 6 grown adults because you would in that case be over your payload capacity. Now, enough about me playing mom. Let's get this trailer hooked up and get on the road. I am towing a 20-foot aluminum enclosed trailer with a V-nose on the front. It has brakes on both axles, and it has my BMW E36 race car loaded in it to go racing at Hyperfest with the National Autosport Association. All right, so let's talk towing with the 2023 Infiniti QX80. I am on the way to Hyperfest at VIR, that is the automotive amusement park of the East Coast, as they label it. I've been helping run the event for the last 10 years or so. It is super duper fun if you are a car and motorsports enthusiast. This happens every May at Virginia International Raceway, and you should totally come check it out. It is super, super fun. There's a lot to do whether you are a driver or just someone who appreciates motorsport and wants to get some rides and watch all the fun. So super pumped for that. We're on the way there. Got a new engine in my race car after last month's catastrophic series of events at Summit Point. But anyway, we're not here to talk about any of that. We're here to talk about this Infiniti. So how is it towing? Better than I thought it would. And I caveat the thought it would part because 2 years ago I towed this same trailer with another E36 race car with a Nissan Armada, which is this car's platform mate. The Armada was not always a total platform mate until I think 2017, and then it was. And like I said earlier, these are both based on the Nissan Patrol that is sold overseas. And when I towed this trailer with the Armada, I liked it, but I didn't love it. I thought it did fine, but I thought it was kind of soft, and I said, you know, this is just a lot of trailer for this truck, and et cetera, et cetera. I was like really not super into it. This is doing a better job than I remember the Armada doing, which I find very fascinating because they're like the same truck. It's entirely possible that, you know, my memory's a little cloudy. It's been 2 years, but either way, this is doing a fine job. Suspension-wise, it is still on the softer end of things compared to most tow vehicles because, like I said, this starts life as a Patrol. These are meant to be off-road-ish oriented, at least in other parts of the world. And then this being an Infiniti, they're also going for a good ride. You know, they want a lot of ride comfort and ride quality. So the ride unloaded is good. I drove this through Washington, D.C. before I hooked the trailer up, hit some bad roads, purposely tried to, you know, get the suspension a little out of sorts, and it does ride really nicely unloaded. It's got that cross-linked suspension, that body control, but that really just helps with cornering. It doesn't help with overall like ride quality. So I think the suspension tuning is generally pretty good here. That body control, that dynamic body control setup is doing a nice job here when I'm going through corners with the trailer. Obviously, nothing is going to be a handling machine when you're towing a 20-something foot trailer behind you, but this feels nice and composed, nice and put together, really easily maneuverable, and that is something that I wouldn't say lightly. So the more I drive this, the more I'm getting comfortable with it, obviously, and I think the handling and the steering are all pretty good. The general body control is also really nice with the trailer hooked up, and that's something that I was worried about initially because this is softer as they go, it is shorter wheelbase as they go, and this trailer is pretty big. It's going to catch the wind, especially as, you know, 18-wheelers and other big trucks pass you at highway speed. This has been pretty easy to control. I had one gust of wind, there was no truck around me, just a gust of wind caught it, and I had one little moment of, you know, had to give some steering input. Otherwise, totally fine. Infiniti does have trailer sway control on here, but that did not activate when I had that one big wind gust. They say that if it does activate, you get a message in the cluster, and I didn't get anything. So no big deal there, but generally more stable than I thought it might be, which is a good thing. As far as the engine is concerned, this 5.6, I mean, this has been around forever and ever at this point. I think the power and torque are fine. You know, 400 horsepower, 413 pound-feet are plenty. Something about it, it doesn't make power really until about 3,000 RPM. It really starts to kind of come on boil there. And then, of course, it's plenty strong all the way up right about to redline. So very typical for a big gas V8. I'm just spoiled because I've driven a lot of stuff with turbochargers recently, and that just makes towing so much nicer. But the engine itself is fine. Right now we're just cruising, so it's not very noisy. It does get a little loud about 4,000 RPM or so if you're climbing hills. That is my only complaint, but it's a V8, so it sounds pretty good. So is it really a complaint? No. It's just a notable thing. Now, as we go down this hill, I'm going to get on the brakes a little bit. Nissan and Infiniti have really good tow haul downshift logic. So what I mean by that, there is a tow mode button over here by your drive mode knob dealy. And when you're in tow mode, it will pay more attention to the transmission logic, and it will downshift for you as you go down a hill and apply the brakes, or it will downshift for you on a flat surface as you apply the brakes. And it will do different things based on, you know, the pitch and yaw of the vehicle. So I think Ford is the best in the industry for this. They've got really, really smart programming, but this Infiniti and its associated Armada sibling are really also up there as far as how well it works. Other manufacturers do it not nearly as effectively, so this is really a strong point of this as a tow vehicle, is that auto downshifting. As far as the transmission behavior otherwise, it's generally fine. We're going uphill, so you're going to hear that. Yeah, there's that V8. Transmission behavior is very, very normal and fine generally. It's quick to downshift for these hills, so you're not really often bogging and out of the power band. I've caught it a couple times on upshifts where it wants to go from 1 to 2 very early, and then you go for more power and it won't go back down to first very easily. It's pretty reluctant, obviously, and then you're just kind of like bogging and out of power. But pretty rare. You can also slap it over and shift it manually if you need to, and it will listen and it will let you run right up against the fuel cut and bang right off of it, which is great. So transmission behavior is generally fine. I've gotten some rougher downshifts as I've put more miles on it and gotten some heat in the fluid, and part of me thinks that they're just programming it to do that as it builds transmission temperature, honestly, to save the transmission. You know, if the way you kill an automatic is by slipping the shifts, actually, and making it more of a luxury feeling transmission. So they're a touch rough, they're a touch firm, but I think they're doing it for transmission longevity as that fluid builds temperature. I pulled over, I got gas, it cooled off just a teeny bit, and everything's been much nicer again. So just kind of an odd little thing, but it's probably to keep itself happy, which is a good thing. Now, the other thing with the transmission, this is only a 7-speed, like I mentioned, and that I say only like it's a problem. It's generally not. I think the ratios are generally well spaced, but having 7 gears versus some of the competition having 8 or 10 means that each gear is going to be a little bit longer. And what that means is you're going to have these kind of gaps in where the power can be produced and output. I think if this was an 8-speed instead of a 7 and they tweaked all the ratios just a touch, it would feel a little more comfortable, especially pulling on grades. You're going up hills. I think that would make it feel just a little more spry, because like I said, this makes plenty of power and torque. It just has to work for it, and every so often you kind of catch it a little flat-footed, but generally it's doing a nice job. So overall, I'm actually quite impressed with this as a tow vehicle as these go. The Armada, for whatever reason, didn't perform quite as well to my memory, like I mentioned. It is entirely possible that Infiniti has the suspension tuned just a touch differently on this versus the Nissan variant of it all, and I suspect that's a little bit of what's going on here. The automatic rear load leveling works totally fine. I do have weight distribution set up on the trailer. Infiniti recommends it if you're pulling over 50% of the rated weight, so if you're over about 4,200 pounds on the QX80, and I just generally like it. It keeps the steering feeling much better without, you know, having the nose popped up a little bit, keeps the weight on the axles where it should be. So it's nice and stable. The weight distribution is easy to set up, of course. It's going to be different with everything with your Hitch, but all you have to do is keep the door open while you're hooking up, and the suspension will not load level on its own, so it gives you time to hook up your bars and everything, shut the door, and then it levels. The one thing that I just find so bizarre is that there's this blank panel down here, because I went back and looked at my photos of the Armada, and they share a center stack at this point. More or less. I think it's all the same. If not, it's very, very close. But there's this panel here. And on the Armada, if you have like a mid-trim or higher, Nissan includes a built-in Tekonsha P2 trailer brake controller. And it works very nicely. The Infiniti QX80 costs more than the Armada, and you cannot get a built-in trailer brake controller despite the panel being here for one. So I find that kind of amusing. If you're an Infiniti expert and you know where to look that I'm not, I looked all on their build and price tool, on the accessories page, everywhere, and you just can't get it, whereas Nissan just bundles it with all of them, no matter what else you choose in your build. So I find that very strange. I am using a Tekonsha Prodigy RF. This is a wireless trailer brake controller that plugs in to a cigarette lighter style outlet here on this side, and then there's a box that goes between the truck and the trailer to actuate the trailer brakes based on what I'm doing with the brake pedals. So it works really well. I use it with a ton of different tow vehicles. If you're interested in one of these, I will link to it in the description below. It's worked very, very well. It's great if you need to change between trailers or tow vehicles a lot. Very surprised that this is just not included or offered, even given this costs more and it's more or less the same vehicle. I'm sure it's pre-wired back there so someone can install one, but just odd. All right, and that is it for this towing review of the 2023 Infiniti QX80. Thank you as always for coming along. Please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe right here on YouTube. Please give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Out Motorsports. And if you'd like to join a growing community of LGBT automotive enthusiasts and motorsports competitors, head over to outmotorsports.com. We have a whole bunch of people online that would love to be your new best friends, and we are hosting events around the United States, both the rest of this year and into 2024. Till next time, please stay safe, be well. See you again soon.